Informing, advising, storytelling. Creating content your audience loves takes time. Making it profitable shouldn't. That's where Google AdSense comes in. With AdSense, trusted advertisers show their ads on your site, creating revenue for you from the content you make. That's revenue for you to keep creating great content and take your business to the next level. With access to the world's largest advertiser base, AdSense is widely used. More than 2 million publishers, just like you, are using it. And because all ads are checked and powered by Google, you can be sure they're both appropriate and highly relevant to your audience. AdSense is easy, and getting started is fast. You just need your name, address, and Google account. Plus, it only takes one snippet of code to connect your site and start running ads. Yep, right there. Great, you're up and running. And that snippet, it does a lot. It gets you the best of Google's automation, automatically building the best setup for you. It lets you optimize your ads through smart technologies that get better over time. And most importantly, it gets you the revenue you need to create more amazing content, keeping more users happy, coming back, and growing your business. Over and over. You get the picture.
Hi everyone! I'm super excited to welcome you all at our event, Women of AdSense. My name is Dasha and I'm leading scalable communications for AdSense product, and I will be running this event for you today. On behalf of the AdSense team, I would like to thank you all for taking your time and gathering to celebrate the diversity of inspiring and successful women-led businesses that belong to you, our AdSense publishers. We have quite a packed agenda today. We'll open with the introduction from our EMEA Director of Monetization Partnerships. Then you'll hear stories of your fellow AdSense publishers. And after, you will learn how to develop powerful and strong storytelling together with our content strategy manager, Sam. And we'll have a short break afterwards, followed by the monetization tips on growing your earnings together with Maria, AdSense product manager. And we'll finish up with the inspirational speech on resilience, something that we all need more in the moment, from Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hutton, who is a firefighter and an author. I will run you through the quick housekeeping rules. As you see, we're all working from home at the moment, so apologies in advance in case you see some cats, dogs, or kids running in the background. Sorry for any technical issues that might occur. If they occur, please stay on this page. We will come back to you as soon as we can. Hope nothing happens, but just a heads up. So you as well will receive the recording of this event on this same page of the live stream. You can see the button below the video for asking questions. Do not hesitate and ask questions to us. We will answer them when we have time during the event. And as well, after this event, you will receive an email with the survey and the feedback that we would always be glad to hear from you. I think now we are ready to start. And I'm inviting Anthony, the head of EMEA Online Partnership Group, for the opening remarks. Please, Anthony.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first Women of AdSense Summit. My name is Anthony Nakash, and at Google, I'm leading monetization partnerships across EMEA. You're roughly 450 with us today, joining from all over Europe, Middle East, Africa, but also sometimes beyond. And this is very exciting to have so many of you join for 2-hour sessions dedicated to you, our women partners, and allies. Now, you might be wondering why a man is opening up an event focused on women. And if this is the case, this is a fair question. For a long time, I actually did not see any problem with diversity, or actually lack of it. And I was not even conscious of my own biases. But over the last few years, working at Google, I've experienced the power of building more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive teams. I've also experienced the challenges of building these teams. And it is clear to me that minoritized groups will never thrive unless the majority, people like myself, decide to actively support the change. As a result, I'm now the exec sponsor of Women at in Dublin, our EMEA HQ. Women at is a Google internal network committed to empowering all women and people who identify as women by connecting, developing, and retaining female talent. I also represent Google AdSense in EMEA, and we are proud to partner with so many inspiring and successful businesses. We believe that the uniqueness of the people running these businesses is critical to what we do, and we love to see this diversity shining through the content you produce. Today is the last day of March, and March is Women's History Month, a time to highlight the contribution of women throughout history. So this event is a way to show our support, fostering leadership, inclusion, and connection in the AdSense community. We recognize that women publishers are underrepresented on the AdSense platform, and we want to target that directly with dedicated support to drive confidence, knowledge, and business growth amongst women publishers. Women-run businesses have historically struggled to secure financial support and access to resources they need to grow their online presence. With the pandemic, women are leaving the workforce at a staggering rate, with women of color even more heavily impacted. Women are also reporting higher level of stress, burnout, and inability to disconnect while working from home. And at Google, we're committed to making diversity, equity, and inclusion part of everything we do, from how we build our product to how we design our offices and how we engage with our partners. We work hard to build a workplace that creates a sense of belonging and do our best to strengthen the diverse communities both within and outside of the company. This drives much better team, much better business performance, but I also like to think that this is just the right thing to do. And as a data-driven company, Google has been publishing annual diversity reports since 2014. We use these reports to ensure fairness in our people processes and to improve representation across all offices. But all this work does not mean everything is perfect. I'm always looking for feedback and insights from others, and I'm sure I will learn a lot from the session today. Today's session is going to be a mix between discussions about women's empowerment and training to help you all capture the economic opportunity just in front of you. Hopefully, you'll find inspiration from our speakers, but also very practical tips on how to run your business very effectively. Now, I don't want to take more time away from the actual content of the day. Please do interact with us as much as possible through the live polls, the Q&A, the post-event survey, and just make the most out of it. Thank you again for joining, and I wish you a great event.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much for stressing out the necessity and at the same time, our commitment to help support women-run businesses always, but especially during these uncertain times. Thank you for that. We would like to provide you, our publishers, with the resources and materials to help you learn more about AdSense. We'd like to know more, where do you search for the information about AdSense? You should see the poll question at the moment on the right side of the video. Feel free to answer this question on where do you get information about AdSense. You will also be able to see how other people respond and other publishers' answers. But we will continue and move move with our agenda. We would like to share with you some stories of your fellow women publishers in the Women of AdSense panel. With this, I'm inviting my colleague, Ezgi, who will lead you through the panel.
Hello. I am very excited to be here in front of all of you with two of the publishers from our business, Emily and Christine. So welcome, Emily, Christine. I'd like to introduce you quickly. So Emily is a very experienced publisher who worked extensively in e-commerce, media, and since 2019, she's working in a customer marketplace with review in a website that is dedicated on reviews. And then Christine has a slightly different journey. She is having her own website and her own business, horoscopes.uk, and she started a long time ago. But just to get more information from you, Emily and Christine. So I'd like to start with Emily. How did you get into publishing, and kind of what made you stay?
Yeah, hello everyone. First, thank you for being there as a guest speaker. I accidentally fell into the publishing field. First, I worked in marketing, and the boss from my first company decided to internalize the advertising agency. So he asked me if I wanted to become the traffic manager during this period. I worked a lot with ad serving and also yield management with several SSPs and of course AdSense. The uniqueness of my work made me stay also. You have to analyze all kind of new businesses and check if it fits to your company, especially where you are on the publishing side. I love to analyze, to optimize businesses, and AdSense make it possible easily.
That's great. I love it. And Christine, you have a little bit of a different journey. In 1998, before everybody else, you bought horoscopes.uk, but you didn't monetize it until 2006. So would you like to give us more input about what has gone behind the pictures during that period?
Well, I just want to say Emily's word there was fabulous, where she said that she fell into it accidentally. And I really did. I fell into the deepest black hole. I bought the domain name in 1998. I am known as a finance and business astrologer, and that was my aim, was to build a site for that. But then I discovered, of course, people wanted to know their love horoscope, their daily horoscope, of something very different. So between 1998 and 2006, I was just providing a weekly service just with horoscopes. In 2006, I met my son-in-law who said, look, you can make money out of this. I knew nothing about optimization at all. And then we put AdSense on. So the AdSense journey actually started in 2006, by which time the traffic had grown exponentially, right? So we were sitting on something very different. So it became a different business to the one that I imagined. And then I started the other one, the financialuniverse.co.uk, which focuses on my real work as I see it.
Okay, very good. Emily, I'm going to go back to you. You mentioned, I also really like that you say you fell into it by accident, but I believe a lot of things in life happen that way. But since then, what would be your most memorable milestones in your career in publishing?
I would say that I had two memorable milestones in my professional journey. The first, it was with Prime Minister Rakuten. It's a huge Japanese marketplace. They chased me thanks to my expertise in yield management and ad serving on Google Ad Manager. I had a higher position as the head of monetization, which include selling data, insurances, advertising spaces. And the second memorable milestone is my actual company, plusquepro.com. They have a special managerial policy. They adapt themselves to their workers. Thanks to them, I can conciliate my life as a mother of two babies and a successful work life with a high position. They can really understand what is at this balance makes me happy, and I think it's really important. So those are the two memorable milestones of my professional journey.
Okay, that's very good. And Christine, I'll go to you now. What do you see as the biggest challenge or the biggest opportunity in publishing at the moment?
Gosh, that's a very big question. Can I talk about one that was very difficult, which may be peculiar to what I do, but may apply to other people as well? We made a very big mistake at one point where we allowed to have the advertising that was with sound. And of course, if people were reading their horoscopes at work, they didn't want people to know that they were doing that. So the sound thing was, those adverts became a disaster. We actually lost a lot of traffic because of that. And that was a turning point for me, because then I had to start to realize that I had to learn more about advertising and what really suits your customer. And that doesn't always fit in with an easy algorithm, or at least doesn't for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually very interesting because we love hearing from our publishers what kind of feedback they have, and then also to work in our product depending on that, and actually provide as much controls as possible for publishers to have. But I'll come to the monetization bit in a minute.
Yeah.
Before that, Emily, last year has been difficult. You especially changed jobs in 2019, around the end of it. But I'd like to ask you, in this last year, that's been a tough one for everybody around the globe. How have you pivoted in your work or professional, personal life?
Actually, the company I work with today, plusquepro.com, is the leader for customer review in craftsman French industry. Our company reviews are reviewed and verified by an independent and certified organization with a unique blockchain system. I explain all this because after I will explain how it pivotates. The company, they have also several digital activities, media, e-commerce, marketplace. And our commercial, they work with craftsmen. They have to go to companies, to production, to construction sites. And during the pandemic, it was not possible. So our CEO and CTO, they turned those difficulties into opportunities, actually. They digitalized all the selling process, and it was a very large success, actually. They created also a marketplace for our members so they can continue to sell their services and products during the lockdown. And also, the other part is our audiences on our media website. They were increasing during lockdown, thanks to the type of website we have, actually. Those website is on opening hours and shops. Tell me where to buy.co.uk and the shop.co.uk. And this website, actually, everyone was searching for hours and the shops hours, opening hours. So the audience was increasing, and our CPM also on AdSense, they were increasing during those lockdowns. So for us, on the overall, it was a pretty successful year, but it was the chance also to pivot a little bit our businesses.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Christine, so from Google or AdSense, I'd like to ask you, you've been in the business for quite a long time now. What has worked the best for you?
I actually, some of the best things have come out of the meetings that Google invited me to. They were really because I was slow on the curve to understand about the lean towards mobile devices. I was really slow on that, right? And then slower to understand, that the size and things mattered. There were a lot of technical things, and we had some very good meetings and came back with some very interesting information that we were there. Our real problem is that when we first designed this is long before some of you were born, I think. Our original site was devised with something called Front Page, which probably doesn't even exist anymore. Right? And then we had a customized website done. It's not even WordPress. It's been built specially for us. And the Google team have been very helpful in showing us how we can use what we've got and make the most of what we've got.
Perfect. And you mentioned earlier that the monetization that you have from horoscopes.uk helps you focus on what is your main specialty.
Oh, absolutely, without any doubt. That revenue stream actually pays for quite a lot of research in the other side of the business. I'd written a book, I'd written several books, and one of them I'd said that we were going to have this pandemic probably in 2020, right? And I needed to do more research, and really that revenue stream has enabled quite a bit of research to go on in the background, and will do for the next big stuff at the end of this decade.
Okay, I hope it's nothing bad this time.
Well, other generations have lived through crises before. This one is just different. We don't have any experience. And it changed actually the way that we wrote the content provision over this last year. Just as Emily is saying that they had to adapt, we had to make sure that everything that went out was much more positive than it had been, because I was aware of how awful people were feeling. And it will come to an end, this. Yeah.
That's good. I'm happy to hear. And so this is our last question. Emily, I'd like to ask if you have feedback or advice to the woman to grow their business.
I would say that in a certain way, I owe my successes to three major things. The first one is throughout my career, I had three female role models in high position. Sonia Rameau, Isabeau, and Jessie de Albert Peter. There were three very strong women, hard worker, and passionate. And for me, it's really important. The second
Passionate, you said?
Sorry?
Sorry, you said they are hardworking, and I couldn't get the second one. Are they compassionate?
They were passionate.
Oh, passionate. Okay.
Passionate.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. The second one is that I have to work really hard in order to gain trust of my peers. And the third one, I would say, learn from everything, from everyone. In the digital world, you have to adapt yourself all the time. So I would advise to take webinars, even in the field that is not in your area. And I think all those three things helped me to become who I am today. And perhaps it will be good advice for women to grow their businesses.
That's very, very, very nice. Christine, Emily, I am so happy to have you here. Do you have any final things to say before we actually give the stage to Sam to talk about content?
Can I just follow up on something Emily said there? Because you used the word hardworking there. The other thing I would say is that it's absolutely essential to be diligent and to be looking at the thing every day, You can't afford to miss a day. We've been going now for over 20 years, but there's never a day when the site is not given attention.
Yes, so you need to be on top of it and update quite regularly, spend some time on it.
Yes, it's not very well listening to other people, but it is your business. So, and you get known for being the solid one. Like my other full moon letter always comes out just on the full moon. There's no inundation with other emails or whatever. So as long as people know that's what you're going to give, you build up trust.
Yes, that's true. That's actually very, very valid. Thanks so much. I enjoyed this a lot, and thanks a lot for joining today. And I'm gonna give the floor to our MC now, Dasha.
Thank you so much, Christine, Emily, and Ezgi, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I see some of the comments that are posted there as well. Thank you so much for asking your questions, and thank you so much for participating in this live event. So I would like to address one of the questions. Let me just see what is there. Okay, I see that comments are coming. Whoa, so excited to be the part of this program. God bless all women around the world who are doing extraordinary things to make our world a better place. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Very privileged to be here and excited to hear the stories of innovation and diversity from women of AdSense. Thank you. Thank you so much, Taylor. Well, thank you so much. My content will improve also my earnings after this meeting. Super, super excited to have you all. There are questions. I see there is a question regarding the recording and after the session from Pascal. As I mentioned earlier, yes, there will be a recording, and the recording will be available on the same live stream page. Yeah. Any more questions that I could see at the moment? Okay. Great. Thank you so much. So we are having a bit of a pause, but at the same time, I would like to introduce potentially the poll that we have for the next poll that we have. So in my role at Google, I develop the content that we distribute, throughout the different scalable channels that are there. And one of the biggest challenges that we have always been seeing is creating the engaging and the powerful content. So we will move to the next session soon. However, I would like for you to answer the poll question that we have on the right. So what do you find as the biggest challenge of writing the greatest content? You can choose from the following options on the screen, which are: I find content writing easy, I find it difficult to keep my content up to date, I need more ideas, I don't have time, and I don't have enough traffic. So in a couple of seconds, we will introduce Sam, our speaker, who will run you through the content. However, at the same time, I would like to thank you all again for being here. We are very ready to go live already now with our next speaker. So to address the topic of the simplicity of writing the content and to simplify your challenge of writing the content, we invited our own content strategy manager, Sam, who works together with the product team to develop content for AdSense. And yeah, I'd like the team to invite Sam now. Hi, Sam.
Good morning, Dasha.
And the floor is yours. Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to speak to you today, and also, it's a subject that's close to my heart. We don't have much time, but my wish is that in just touching upon the subject of communicating your story simply and powerfully, that in some small way, the best case scenario, in some small way, I may be able to inspire in you how you can create content that comes from the heart, content that's authentic, and content that folks will naturally be drawn to. So I look forward to this presentation, and once again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to all you brilliant people. So
thanks, Sam.
Next slide, please. Right. So we talk about communicating simply and powerfully. That simplicity, well, that can be achieved with certain techniques. There are things that we can do to help hone and craft our message. I'm a content strategist, and content strategy and UX writing overlap. They're very adjacent and connected disciplines. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But UX writing offers us some techniques of communicating simply online in a UI or user interface. The power, when we're thinking about communicate simply and powerfully, well, the power comes from trusting yourself, from being authentic. It's one of those things that seems very easy to say, but actually it's like a light bulb going on or a switch being switched. When you understand that you are important, you are authentically you, the things that you think and do, the things that happen in your life, they're authentic and they can drive your content. They can actually make a difference. It's not about copying other folks. It's about honoring yourself and honoring the things that happen in your life. So next slide, please. So we have an agenda here, right? 5 topics. I'm going to, like a butterfly, I'm going to land very gently on each of them and then fly away again. We don't have much time, but hopefully some of the words, thoughts, and images will hopefully inspire you. I'm going to start off with a quick story. You know, my poor wife has heard all my stories, and so I can't tell you how exciting it is for me to find a new audience who've not heard my stories before. This is a great moment for me, so thank you for listening. But I'm going to tell you a quick story, and the hope is you'll see that from my own life, an ordinary life, I was able to create some content, for want of a better word, and tell a story. So before coming to Google, I was a professional songwriter, and you know, writing has always been a great sort of hobby of mine, and eventually became a job. But this chap here, this is my granddad, who I was named after. He's called Samuel Semple. I never met him. He died poor miner in his 40s before I was born. So I was always fascinated by this chap that that I was named after. Next slide, please. As a musician, I was really into all sorts of music, and a relative of my granddad, who I never met, told me, look, your granddad was really into music as well, son. He loved Johnny Cash. And the relative gave me all these records, and he said, son, your granddad loved one song in particular. It meant a lot to him. And he told me that song. Do you know, a funny thing happened? I could never bring myself to listen to that particular song because I got quite emotional thinking about it. Because I never met my granddad, and there before was some sort of mysterious link, you know, a song. And over time, I'm embarrassed to admit that I forgot about those records, and I forgot which song it was. And the relative also passed away, so the link, the ephemeral link to my granddad, disappeared. And this bugged me. And over time, as a fledgling songwriter, you know, I'd always pick up my guitar. I used to think about that, think about my granddad, think about the chap I was named after, think about forgetting the song that linked us. And I had this weird refrain, very, very simple, that just kept repeating, that somehow, in some weird way, captured some of the sadness and the confusion and the mystery I was feeling. And the refrain goes something like this: da 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 da, da 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 da. I just kept repeating it, just in my head. Anyway, next slide, please. In terms of trying to write the song, right, put the words to this song with these feelings, I struggled. The words wouldn't come. I was just left with these feelings, but this refrain, right? About a year or so later, next slide, please, I started writing songs with this incredible chap here, who's now an old friend of mine, a chap called Tom Baxter. And we used to have these songwriting sessions, and he'd go, hey, what's going on in your life? You're getting married soon. Why is that? And I said, well, my life's been, you know, all right. It's been up and down, but I'm happy, I think, with my life. But my life with my wife to be in it, Henrietta, I think my life's better. She just makes my life better. And we thought, well, this is a good place to start. This word better seems to sit on top of, you know, a sort of gentle, slightly humble way of expressing something. And so we had a title. we didn't have any music. And it was then I thought, well, look, I've had this sad refrain all about my granddad somehow. Da 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 da. Can we use that? And in the end, we did. Next slide, please. And we wrote this song called Better, right? We just teased out all these things that were floating in the air and pulled it together over time. And next slide, please. When I did get married, that's me and my wife on the right, Tom sang the song that we'd written at our wedding. It was the first time that it had been sung in public. We had a cut price, bargain basement wedding. Nobody had any money, but it was a really joyful affair. But then a funny thing happened. Tom recorded an album, and this song was on it, and the album became a #1 hit. And the song became a very well-known song, and other folks started covering, and people started using this song as their first dance wedding song. And when Prince Harry and Meghan got married, ITN, who were covering the wedding all day along with the BBC, when they came to do a big closing montage of the wedding day, of the royal wedding day, they used this song, our song Better, and played it in its entirety in front of an audience of millions around the world. And I tell you this because, look, many people have a granddad. Many people experience a loss or a disconnection. People get married. I mean, these are fairly normal things, right? But the content, and simple word, better, but it sits on top of something that's just true, just authentic, because it's true, right? Next slide, please.
Our love has changed. It's not the same. And the only way to say it is say it. It's better.
So there you go. That was the sad refrain, da 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 da, and the title, Better. Okay, next slide. Think like a UX writer. So I told you I'm a content strategist. Content strategy, UX writing, they're two disciplines. They're actually quite new disciplines, and you see them in tech a lot, right? So here at AdSense, you've had content strategists and UX writers, along with everyone else, trying to make your lives easier and products better. Next slide, please. Very briefly, content strategists generally sort of zoom out, take a big picture view, and make sure that features and products are all connecting together and they have a sort of consistent tone of voice. Next slide, please. And UX writers, they tend to zoom in more and look precisely at the feature, the page, getting users from A to B so they enjoy their experience, that they are welcomed to a new page or a new product or a new feature and enjoy it enough that they want to come back and use it again, right? So there are things that we do to encourage these positive behaviors. Next slide, please. One thing is front loading. One of Google's famous writers, Sue Factor, says front loading is a virtue in the UI, the user interface. So I'll tell you the secret right now. Make the text shorter. Now that doesn't mean for everything. It doesn't mean that you don't have text, but it signifies that we are now thinking really intentionally about how and what we're trying to say. We're not just dumping words on a page. We can't. As UX writers, we absolutely can't. We have to be super intentional about the words we use, what we're trying to convey, and when, and to who. And it's something that you can think about too. Next slide. Sue also says, remove as much text as you can and polish the remaining words until they gleam. I like that because it's about iteration. That song that you heard, it took months to write, chipping away at it, and it sat upon a whole bunch of incoherent feelings, emotions, and all sorts of things, all the things that everyone has. Nothing nothing that not anybody else has, doesn't have. But it required a lot of polishing and a lot of getting it right. Next slide, please. Something to think about. When words appear on a screen, as opposed to in a book, eyes scan a page in a certain pattern. We call it the F shape, right? Eye trackers have shown this. This is especially so for desktop and laptop, and to a lesser extent, but still true for mobile. I scan in a certain way, and look what this means, right? That your titles, your headers, your subheaders suddenly become very important, right? Next slide, please. Can we make the headers, the titles, tell that whole story in a heartbeat, like a song title, like a film title? So think about that, right? Next slide, please. Hit the top notes. I just want you to think about that phrase for a moment. Hit the top notes. Next slide, please. At Google internally, we use a lot of acronyms. It can be quite mind baffling at times, keeping track of them. I think it's a thing in tech. One that we use is TLDR. It means too long, didn't read. But it's interesting is too long, didn't read. The way we use it, if we want to write a big email, maybe to a whole bunch of people, maybe with some bosses involved, we're encouraged to summarize what it is exactly we're trying to convey. And we do this at the top, TLDR, and there's our line. There's our top note, right? There's our header, there's our title, there's our song title. TLDR. Internally, we are trained and encouraged to try and capture the essence of what it is we're trying to communicate. And then we'll have the details. Next slide, please. I remember sailing to Menorca. I'm not very well traveled. I was on a boat as a young man, never been anywhere really. Before I got to the island, I could smell it. It was the first time I'd ever smelled an island. The herbs, cypress trees, rosemary, thyme. It was amazing how the air changed. It made a real impression, the top note of the island. Before I even got there, I had an impression, and a good one, of this place. Next slide, please. You can also think about it in terms of a perfume pyramid, right? What are the top notes? Underneath, we've got the heart notes, the bass notes, but what's the thing that draws you in? What's the first impression? As I'm scanning the page in an F shape, what am I seeing? I'm not reading the content straight away. I'm breathing it in. Well, what is it that you're telling me? What is it are we telling our users in that top note, right? That first impression. Next slide. As a young songwriter, I actually had this pinned to my wall, something I wrote, which strangely still holds true to me. A little credo. Attract your friends with glitter, then hold them there with substance, right? Now, next slide. This quote here, I love. Tom Waits, he says, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. Sadly, very true in much of life. Next slide. This is not what we're talking about, though. We're not saying focus on these key headers, key titles, top notes in the absence of the substance, right? It's not a con trick. It's a simple way of trying to express clearly the essence of what it is you're trying to say. And then we have the authentic stuff that supports it. Next slide. So this is a mental image that you've seen this all before, but it's really powerful. It's true. Next slide. What makes something powerful and authentic is all the stuff that it sits atop of, or sits on top of. And that stuff, that authenticity is kind of you and your life and what you understand about what you're saying. There's no tricks involved. We're saying things simply, but we're expressing maybe complexity, emotional complexity, technical complexity. We're expressing it simply, and then we can draw folks in and then unravel the story, right? Next slide, please. Make it memorable, right? Make it memorable. So that, gosh, so many things are boring. Make it memorable. Make your content memorable. Next slide. Little exercise. This is from a tremendous book by Greg McCowan, the disciplined pursuit of less. He talks about essentialism. Quick quiz, right? Well, actually, just privately, you just do this for yourself. Try to match each company with its mission statement. I'll just hang for a second or two, right? Next slide, please. Try to match each company on the left with the mission statement, its mission statement. See if you can do this. Right. I'm going to read directly from Greg McCowan's book that I took this from. I'm going to pretend it's him addressing you. How did you do? If you had absolutely no idea how to solve this puzzle, you are not alone. The largely indistinguishable statements make the task almost impossible. Such vague, inflated mission statements may still be considered best practice in some quarters, but in many cases, they do not achieve what they were intended to achieve, to inspire their employees with a clear sense of purpose, right? Next slide. What we don't want is to be boring, right? We don't want to send people to sleep. And I can tell you a surefire way to send people to sleep is to base your content on what you think others are doing and sort of copying it or mimicking it. I mean, being inspired is totally fine, but you know what I mean? Thinking, well, it's business, I have to speak in a businessy sort of way, right? What I'm trying to say is to avoid that, it comes from you because you are interesting. Your life is interesting. It really is. The things that are in you are interesting, infinitely interesting. Do you know, I have one child. My wife and I have one child. I remember being massively hit. Can we, let's move on to the next slide. I'm tired of this chat now. He's sending me to sleep. Before we get to this, let me tell you about when we had a child. I remember thinking that it was the most special moment of my life. And yet children are born all the time. So how can something so humdrum be so special? I mean, so statistically humdrum, right? It's not a unique event, people being born. But in my life and in your life and in her life and in her life and in his life, it's a life-changing event. How can that be? Because it's authentic to you. Another great book, Matthew Lunn, The Best Story Wins, right? Luckily enough, I had a chance to attend a workshop run by Matthew Lunn. He was a storyteller and writer for Pixar for 20 years. And even in his book, as he's telling us about how the best story wins and how to write stories, his chapter titles are telling stories too. And here are three of them. The hook. An opening line should invite the reader to begin the story. It should say, listen, come in here. You want to know about this. Authenticity. Tell me the facts and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. Native American proverb. That story is you. You are authentic, right? Connecting. If a story is not about the hero, she will not listen. Now look, I actually changed that to she. I brought John Steinbeck up to date a bit, right? Because actually you are our hero. Next slide, right? We're talking about hero, connecting. Who's the hero? Next slide. You, women of AdSense, you genuinely are our hero, right? And our job is to try and make life easier for you, to try and help you, to try and support you and sort of walk with you on the journey, right? One of the ways in which we try to do this with a product called Auto Ads. Auto Ads started off as something called page level ads. So the underlying WYSI technology that we were developing to try and sort of auto populate ads for you, to do some of the heavy lifting for you. Started with page level ads, right? But page level ads, I mean, it's very, what does it mean? It's very inward sounding, very inward looking, very technical. The facts are there, but the story around what it's doing and why it's there is not there, Next slide, please. So we polished and gleaned and we iterated and we tried to tell a better story on top of the underlying engineering. And we used it as a moment to change the name to Auto Ads, to pivot, to signpost our intention that AdSense is going to move towards a more automated, more helpful, even more helpful future, right? But look, even here, when you land the top note, automatically smarter ads, okay. But it's still about how smart the ads are, right? It's not about you, right? So we can't rest. We have to keep telling that story and connecting in more meaningful ways. Next slide, please. And now we're saying, look, let Google place ads for you because you are the hero of the story, right? And this captures the benefit for you. It's not about page level ads and the functionality, or then how smart our ads are. It's about you, right? Add one piece of code to your site, and Google will automatically show ads in all the best places, right? So we're iterating, and we're trying to use language and storytelling here, even in our products. Next slide. Now you can use very basic. You can also use very basic sort of poetic devices, cadence, da 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 da, and the rhythm and alliteration, internal rhyme, right? Here's something. Look at Google's values. This is an internal thing here, but I'm sure it's completely fine to show you this because it's searchable on the web. Next slide. These are Google's values. Respect the user, respect the opportunity, respect each other. 9 words, 3 of them repeated, but intentionally so, because it captures the gist of what we're trying to do for our users. It's also memorable and easy to remember, right? Internally, these phrases, respect the user, respect the opportunity, respect each other, sit on top of a lot of very well thought out content, a lot of philosophy. Respect the user, we say focus on the user and all else will follow. Respect the opportunity. We only succeed when others succeed. And we unpack this much more internally. But we can remember these, the top note, respect. Next slide, please. The point being is it's very intentional, and they're not 9 words thrown together. They sit atop real thinking, real philosophy, real intentionality. Next slide, please. As a UX writer, as a writer, as a songwriter, I'm always striving and perhaps failing because you can never completely do it. I'm always chasing an elegance and a simplicity to my writing and communication. I never get there, but I'm trying. And I feel that, looking at the effortless swoosh of a calligraphy brush captures something in the simplicity and beauty of communication. Also, if we think about pictograms in Chinese and Japanese characters, Japanese kanji, not only are they phonetic, but they tell a story as well. Next slide. We need stories, right? It's not just about facts. Lovely quote here from actually a great storyteller in Google, Bijan. If being right was enough, we wouldn't need stories. And what's the difference between facts and being right? What's that extra bit that makes it compelling? What's that bit that makes it a story? Well, it's you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sam. I just love this song. What an amazing story. Sam, actually, at the moment, we are kind of like overwhelmed with the amount of comments and questions that are coming from the audience. And I was wondering, would you mind of taking a couple of minutes to answer one or two of them?
Be my pleasure.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So there is a question from Lindsay. If you are short of time in writing the content, what would be your 3 top tips to prioritize?
Short of time writing the content, I think if you've established the habit of trying to summarize in your mind what it is you're trying to say, then you should become more efficient, right? So you could grab a piece of paper and you could think about, what does the title look like? And what does 2 headers look like? And what are they going to say? 1, 2, 3, right? So you create a spine, the title, header 1, header 2, right? Don't write anything else. And it forces you, it's a forcing function to think about the essence of what it is you're saying. What am I trying to communicate? Why would you be interested in this? Right? Not page level ads, but let Google place ads for you. That's a title. It's only a few words. That's one thing I'd do. You're pausing. You want me to say more on this?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you very much. No, I thought that you had something more to say. No worries. One more, just quick question. I see that publishers are struggling sometimes in writing content with this scarcity. I see the scarcity of time, and here is the scarcity of space. Actually, the question from eVoyage magazine. What about writing posts in social media platforms, especially with the restriction in words in some platforms, such as Twitter, for example? How to reflect such great tips in a small box?
That's a really good question. And you know, it's not easy, but I do think that but look, I'm going to say this, right? I honestly feel that if in your heart you feel that you're communicating to someone, and that in your heart you feel that you have something to communicate to someone, you should be able to summarize that, right? So that's why we talk about the F shape, the why headers and titles are, like song titles, are very important. So maybe think about addressing the user, maybe thinking about, in your short space, talking to me directly, talk to me one-to-one. This is why you'll be interested in this. Don't just name the thing or name the product. Why am I interested in it? And say it in a header, right? Let Google place ads for you. So think about having a conversation with a user. It's about really imagining and almost like we have personas, a UX discipline. Internally, we try and get lots of research and then personify that research into a person to personalize our writing and personalize that. You know, we can imagine Joanna is 23, has started writing content, doesn't know how to monetize it. Joanna is fictitious, but she represents a body of research. But we feel we can try and reach out to Joanna.
Yeah.
So Think about your audience and talk to them and let your headers and titles speak to them.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sam. I think it sounds quite easy just to think that, like, when you're putting yourself in your users or your readers' shoes, you change the perspective and things become a bit easier. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'll see you later. Thanks. We will have a short break now, but before, I wanted to address, thank you so much for responding to the poll. I see as well a lot of questions that are coming about traffic, how increase your page views. We will address these questions after the break in our next sessions. And after this break, we will have the revenue. We will hear about revenue growth tips from our product manager, and as well we may answer some of your questions about AdSense automation and the optimization tips. And as well, we'd like to know more about the audience during the break. Who are these people who are gathered today with us? Who are you publishers? So while you're on a break, could you as well answer a quick question that you see now on the right? Which of the following categories, if any, best describe your content? So we will be back at 11:10. So it is not 5, it's 10 minutes break. So we will see you soon. Thank you so much, and see you at 11:10 back with our product manager to address the revenue growth tips with AdSense. Thank you.
I'm a fourth-generation mango farmer from Ladgar. Since childhood, I was passionate about automobiles. 4 years back, we started a website called carbiketech.com. At Carbike Tech, we present automotive technology in a simplest possible way so that people can correlate with their everyday use.
When we started the website, I used to wonder how other websites, they are getting ads. And then one day Sushant called me and he told me that there is a network, it's called AdSense.
Google AdSense is actually a monetizing platform where you can monetize your content by placing ads. 4 years back, our website went live and I got a dial-up landline connection, which was very slow. Every day we were facing challenges regarding maintenance of our website. We came across one service provider who lays fiber optics and provides good connectivity, but he was expensive. We actually thought of putting our hard-earned money from our revenue from AdSense to lay down those cables. Now everybody in the village has access to good internet connection, and that has changed everything. The change happened gradually, but it was a drastic change.
Your job is to create great content that audiences love. Our job is to make earning money from it effortless, allowing you to focus on what matters most. Now it's even easier with auto ads. Auto ads help save you time and grow your earnings, placing ads where they'll perform best to give you a new, additional revenue stream. Customize auto ads according to your site's needs. Customize ad formats to suit your content. Use the ad load control to choose how many auto ads are shown on your pages. Any ad placements you don't like? Just remove them with a click. You can also exclude specific pages or entire sections if you don't want to show auto ads on them. Plus, you can easily see auto ads and manual ad units' performance side by side for each of your sites without detailed reporting. Auto ads are easy to set up. They work with your existing AdSense code, so there's no need to make any changes to your site. Just visit your AdSense account and use the toggles to turn on auto ads. Then use the ad settings preview to check how your site looks before the ads go live. Ready? Choose Ads. Select which site you want to turn on auto ads for and click to set up. Preview how ads look on your site. Customize them using the settings. Click Apply to Site, and let Google take care of the rest. It's that easy to start earning money from your content with AdSense Auto Ads. Try it today.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you are enjoying our event so far. We have heard from your AdSense fellow publishers, learned about storytelling and creating content. And now the part that many of you were looking forward to, we've received a lot of questions about this part in the registration form. So we will have an amazing session with our product manager, Maria, who will run you through the revenue growth tips with AdSense. Before we start, we are curious as well to know how you, our publishers, are dealing with AdSense monetization. There is a poll question you can see now on the screen. Please let us know, how do you agree to the following statement? AdSense is worth my time, so I can earn regular income. And with this, I'm inviting Maria to the floor to talk about AdSense growth tips. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Dasha. How are you?
Thanks. The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. My name, as Dasha mentioned, is Maria. I'm an AdSense product manager based here in London. I work in the automation and optimizations area. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you today, supporting the Women of AdSense community. and sharing some of the tips we have of how you can grow your earnings using AdSense. I hope you've been having a wonderful morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, and that you've been finding all of the sessions fun and engaging and interesting. So let's get started today with how you can grow your earnings in AdSense. Before we go into specific tips and tricks, I think it's important for us to understand fully, like, what are the different components that go into your earnings or revenue that you can make with AdSense, and that we fully understand what each of them are and how we can influence each of them moving forward. So if we look at our earnings, they are made up of what we call CPC, or cost per click, times your click-through rates, or CTR, and also the number of page views. I will go in detail into how we define each of these components, and also what we'll cover throughout the session today is how you can influence each of them and make sure you can maximize your revenues moving forward and build a sustainable business. Okay. In the first instance, as I said, we have the cost per click. This is the amount you will make every time a user clicks on ads that you have placed on your site. And the CPC for any ad is determined by the advertiser. So some advertisers might be willing to pay more per click than others, depending on either, the type of product they're advertising, the vertical they belong to, and so on and so forth. The second component we have is click-through rate. So this is the number of clicks divided by the number of page views you have. So, how often users will click on ads that you have on your site. And our last component is what we call a page view. And this is what Google will count in the reports you see within the AdSense UI every time a user views a page that is displaying Google Ads. So these are kind of like the three main components that we need to pay attention to today. Moving forward to the next slide, thank you. We're first going to start talking about cost per click and what are the factors that influence this metric and what you can do about it moving forward. Next slide, please. Thank you. There are different factors that influence CPC. Some of them that are under your control, where we can try and do small gradual changes to ensure that this is more favorable to you, but also some that are completely external factors that we might not be able to influence at all, which are things like I was mentioning before, like the advertiser demand, for example, either where you are located or where your audience is located, things like seasonality, and the vertical or the area where you normally write content about. So all of these factors will have an influence on your CPC. What are the factors that you can actually, as a publisher or creator, really have an influence on and really optimize moving forward? So these factors, I'm going to go into detail into this, but the whole idea here is like we want to expand your demand. We want to expand the amount of ads that are able to search on your site, and also the action pressure that happens when those ads are served on your site. So in the first instance, we're going to talk about blog categories. Then we'll move on, talk a little bit around the ability for you to like either add more ad units on a given page or increase your ad coverage throughout your site. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do this either with manual ad units or with auto ads. And then we'll also introduce a new feature in AdSense called Auto Optimize, which allows you to run experiments. So let's start, thank you, Dasha, with blog categories. So this might seem a bit counterintuitive that we're talking about blog categories, but bear with me whilst I try to explain this. In the AdSense UI, you currently have the ability to block certain ads, certain type of ads, specific ads, advertisers URLs that you don't want to serve in your site. This is fantastic. It gives you control over your user experience and editorial control over the type of ads you want to serve. And it's a feature that obviously we encourage you to join, but our recommendation is to really use this in a very targeted or sparing way. And the reason for this is the more categories you block, and if you really block large categories, this might decrease the ads that are eligible to serve on your sites and decrease the auction pressure, right? So if you really look and review your ads using the Ad Review Center, or you go into like your blocking categories and do a review of these categories, you can really be targeted in the way you use them to ensure that obviously you are offering the best user experience, but also in a way that allows you to maximize your earnings. It's also relevant to mention that on AdSense, you have the ability to run blocking controls experiments. So if you're in a bit of a doubt of which categories or you're thinking about blocking or not, and you're a bit unsure of the impact this might have, you have the ability to run an experiment and understand the impact this is going to have on your revenues before you take that decision. We always encourage you to use experimentation or some of the tools we offer you to continuously review some of the assumptions maybe you have and identify new opportunities moving forward. So one of the first steps you can do immediately after this session is go to your blocking categories within the AdSense UI. This is under blocking controls, and review the ad review center and all of the blocking controls here. And this is going to give you a good overview. Next slide, please. Okay. The second area we were discussing and mentioned is optimize either the number of ad units you're serving on a given page, or maybe the ad coverage that you have across all of your pages. In AdSense, you can either do this manually, you can place your ad units manually, you can decide where in your site you want these to be placed, but we also have a feature called Auto Ads. And Auto Ads, basically what it does is it scans your entire site and place ads where they're likely to perform very well and potentially generate more revenue for you, right? And this basically Auto Ads understands where different elements of your pages are placed and makes decisions of ads placement for you. It's something that is very easy to implement. I'll take you a little bit through, but you just need to add the code and turn it on, and we are going to do all of the heavy lifting for you. Next slide, please. Okay, and how can Auto Ads and why do they help you grow your revenue, right? In the first instance is Auto Ads can always find where to place the ads. So even if you have placed your own manual ad units on your site and you turn on Auto Ads, we're going to be able to make decisions and optimize even further your ad setup. So again, this is possibly a way to help you increase revenues. But also this allows you to save a lot of time. You don't have to think about like those manual ad placement decisions and do all of that heavy lifting yourself. And we will do all of this for you. So again, this allows you to save a lot of time and to reinvest that time that maybe you were using before in your ad setup in creating great content and focusing on what really matters to you, which is creating fantastic content to engage your audiences, right? And we'll show you a bit of the interface now of AdSense so you can see exactly how it looks. But although this sounds something that is completely automatic, you're able to preview how Auto Ads will serve ads on your site. You're able to control the different formats. So you do have the ability to take a lot of the decisions of the best Auto Ad setups for your site. And within Auto Ads, we also have the ability to serve different types of ads based on your needs of your sites, the type of your site, of the experience you want to give your public users. So we have things like in article or in feed ads, for example. We have match content units, which are content recommendations for your end users. We have anchor ads, which are just banners either at the top or the bottom that appear on mobile. And we also have vignettes, which are full page interstitial ads that appear through page loads for your users. Next slide. Thank you, Dasha. So this is the video that I was mentioning before. So you can just click on ads and overview, and then you will find your sites. And if you go into like the edit item, you're able to look at your auto ad settings. Once you turn your toggle on, your preview will appear on the left-hand side as you're seeing at the moment. And you will have a lot of different settings on the right-hand side to either choose the formats that you want to serve. So when you turn on auto ads, this doesn't mean that you need to have all formats enabled or not. You have absolute control over that. You can also choose the ad load do you want to have, as well as page exclusions. So for example, there might be pages where you do not want to serve any auto ads, and you have the ability to do so. So I really invite all of you to explore the auto ads preview and play around with all of the settings to understand what is the best setup. If you're still a bit unsure and you are not confident on maybe which are the ad formats that might perform best on your site, or you're a bit new to AdSense, we also have the ability for you to run an experiment, an A/B test, and choose your current setup, and you can compare it to a new auto ad setup. And then you will run this experiment over a course of certain days or weeks, depending obviously on the amount of traffic your site has. And then this can show you, how is the new auto ad setup performing? Is it generating new revenues for you? And so on and so forth. So this is a really, really good way for all of you that might not be 100% sure if you want to go down this route, to actually understand if it's worth it for you, if it's generating good revenues moving forward. So as I said before, we really encourage everyone to look at experimentation as a way of keeping optimizing their site constantly and as a way to continuously grow your earnings. Thank you. Another thing that you can do is allow Google to automatically optimize the size of your ad units on mobile with what we call the ad size optimization setting. I will show you where it is in the next slides. But basically, what this allows us to do is to transform your fixed size ad units into responsive ad units, right? And what this can help you do is actually be in the fact that more ads might be eligible to fill your ad units. And this, again, potentially might lead to an increase in revenue. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. Thank you, Dasha. You can find this under ads overview. And if you go into the global setting types, is that ad size toggle there. If this has been a bit too fast, you can also find some of this information in the help center, but here it's a repetition. I hope that's clear enough for everyone. So it's ads overview and global settings where you can find this. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this new feature that is called Auto Optimize. Basically, in the AdSense product, you have the ability to either run your own manual experiments or A/B test, right? So if you want to understand how certain things are performing, you can write different type of experiments. But we have recently launched a feature called Auto Optimize that actually does this for you. So maybe sometimes, even if you have the ability to run your own experiments, you are a bit unsure of what settings you want to experiment with. You don't really know what are the best setups to try. So if you opt into Auto Optimize, we will do this on your behalf. This means that we run experiments on like the 50% of your traffic. We will let you know when the experiment is finished. And even if this is an automatic experiment that we're running on behalf, you're always in control. You can undo any of the changes that we made on your behalf, of course, as long as the underlying settings haven't changed since the experiment ended. And you can also always go back to the status quo. If we move on to the next slide, Dasha, thank you. This feature is under the optimization tab. So if you go to the experiments, interface, this is where you can find the Auto Optimize control. And we have also defined 3 levels for you. So we have Auto Optimize on. This is the setting level we recommend. So this what basically allows us to do is run A/B tests on your behalf. And if we find revenue positive settings, we will automatically apply these settings on your account. So this basically allows you to completely, forget if you want, have Google completely optimizing your site, finding new revenue opportunities. But as I mentioned, of course, you can always review those experiments, understand what are the settings we have been enabling for you, and make an informed decision if that is the right setting for you. We also have a second level of setting for Auto Optimize, which is called suggestions only. So if you're feeling, passionate about this feature, but you always want to review the results of those experiments before any changes are applied to your site, you can go into the suggestions only setting as part of Auto Optimize. In this case, we will only run those A/B tests for you, and then you will be notified in the UI and also via email if an experiment has a revenue positive result and if you can take a decision as if you want to apply those settings or not. So I really encourage all of you to have a look at Auto Optimize just so you can understand what it brings and look at what setting might be available for you. Of course, you can always opt out of auto-optimize if you're someone that always prefers to have full control and run your own manual experiments. As I mentioned, this is also available for you in the AdSense UI. Okay. Now that we have finished with the cost per click bucket, we're going to move to click-through rates. So remember, click-through rates is how often users are clicking on some of these ads, so clicks over your page views. If we move to the next slide, thanks, Dasha. What are the factors that can affect your click-through rate, right? And there are mainly 3 factors that you need to think about in this case. And the first is, any changes in the location of the ads, right? So for example, if you recently changed your ad locations, this might impact your click-through rates. Depending on where they're placed, some ads might be more viewable to your users or less viewable. So we always encourage you, once you do any change in placement, to look at your ad units report to understand and compare the click-through rates of your top 5 or your top 10 ad units, right? And understand if there are any significant changes in them. So this is a really good way for all of you to understand where are the locations in your pages that might be performing best, right? Also, something also we want to draw attention to is potential changes in the ad implementation. Sometimes ad units might be implemented incorrectly, and this can lead to a massive decline in your click-through rates. So if when you access your reports, suddenly you see something that it doesn't really seem quite right, it doesn't compare to a lot of your different ad units, this is a kind of like a really good way for you to understand that something might have gone wrong with your ad implementation. And we would encourage you to do a review and understand if there's anything there that can be fixed. Of course, as a last area, changing the site layout or the design of your site can definitely always have a big impact in click-through rate. One thing that we always encourage you, if you're about to go through a big site layout or redesign, before you do that, really access your ad unit reporting and understand how your ad units were performing on your old site layout or design. Are there any learnings that you can transport in the new redesign of your site that are really going to help you drive these click-through rates moving forward? Okay, one of the things I was mentioning around changing the location of your ads is something that we call viewability, and this is how likely it is for an ad of yours that is appearing on your site to be viewed by a user, right? And within the AdSense reporting, you can have the ability to look at your ads units active view metrics in these reports. And basically, this will tell you which ad units are currently having higher viewability than others. And why is this important? The reason this is important is advertisers can actually have access and understand the viewability of certain ad units or placements. And they might be willing to pay more if they know there is a higher likelihood for these ad units to be viewed by users. And therefore, it is important that you review the ad viewability of your ad units and you try and enhance that moving forward. So as I mentioned, this is available for you in the AdSense reporting, and there's a bit more information about the different ways that you can look into this metric moving forward. Next slide, please. And how can you do this, right? So, first and foremost, create great content. This is what you're experts at doing. So really focus on creating, captivating content that captures viewers' attentions. Actually, when we look at viewability, there's 2 factors that are important. The first one is you need to make sure that the certain proportion of your ad area is going to be visible, and it's going to be visible for a certain period of time, which is over 1 second. So this is why, creating really great and captivating content, it can help the viewability of your ads. As I mentioned before, A/B testing or experiments are really, really key. And these are not only going to allow you to, to enhance your viewability, but a lot of other things, and really understand in a data-driven way what changes that you make to your site can generate more revenue or less revenue, I think it's also sometimes very valuable to run an experiment to understand that a certain setup might not be working for you. That is extremely valuable information for you. So we really, really encourage you to either use the manual experimentation feature or auto-optimize to continuously find these new opportunities and to improve or optimize your setups moving forward. And of course, different ad formats, like I was mentioning before, for example, the ones available as part of auto ads, like anchors, vignettes, or in place, might have different impacts on your viewability numbers. So again, this is also a good way for you to look into all of the different ad formats available and really try out what works best for your site and your audience. Okay, thanks, Asha. We're going to go for the last factor of our earnings equation, which is the number of page views. And what we wanted to do here today is showcase some tools that are available for you that here we have created at Google. And we can move to the next slide, Dasha, please. Thank you. That can really help you increase the number of page views, increase the engagement that your audience has with your sites and your content, right? So we have a collection of success stories that has a lot of different tricks for the community. There's a very proactive community. Please feel free to ask questions, engage, give us feedback. We love to hear what's working or not for you here, but you can drive a lot of inspirations from seasoned AdSense publishers here of what is the best way here to increase your number of page views. You always have access also to Google Analytics that can understand, how some of your pages performing, and you can understand who's visiting them, and so on and so forth. So this is also going to give you very valuable data to understand maybe like which sections of your site are performing better, might have a much larger number of page views than other, and like start deriving which factors can influence that. We have our Google Trends tool, which is always a really fun tool to go and do a bit of research on, but it really reveals what everyone is searching for, what are the trends that we see across the web. And we also have News Consumer. This shows kind of like some different insights across segments or audiences and things that might also like be helpful for you. We also have our Market Finder. This can help you find promotional opportunities. And, last but not least, we also have our Consumer Barometer that really explores how people are using in the internet nowadays, give you, again, new insights that you can use in the way you either set up your site or in the content that you produce moving forward. So just to summarize again, we have 3 key factors to grow your earnings, which are cost per click, click-through rates, and the number of page views. Today, we have just gone through a couple of the different suggestions of how you can approach this moving forward and optimize that. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of information in the community, and we hope you found this tips and tricks useful, and we'd love to hear from you moving forward.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you so much. If I was a publisher, I would just remember this equation of my earnings and just optimize for each of the components. So that's great tips. Thank you for that. There are still some questions that are coming from publishers. If we could address for a couple of minutes, if that is possible.
Yeah, let's go for that.
So there is one question that I really like that shows the interest to the auto-optimize feature that, as you said, was recently launched. So the question comes from Tasha. If you have run the auto-optimize, do you have to manually apply, or does Google have an optimize button to select after the experiment worked? I assume the experiment finished already.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, for the question on auto-optimize. So as I was mentioning before, and I maybe know the video was a bit quick, so I am happy that you're asking this question so we can clarify this. If you put auto-optimize on, which is the top setting, this will mean that we will run the experiments for you. And once the experiment concludes, if we have found a revenue positive setting or experiment, we will automatically apply this for you, right? So again, on, we do everything for you. We run the experiment, and only obviously if it's revenue positive, we will apply those settings. If it's not revenue positive, we revert to your original settings, to the status quo. No changes have happened at all, because we understand that that wasn't an impactful enough opportunity for you. If you're on the suggestions only setting, that is the setting where we only run the experiment for you. And then in that case, it is really up to you to review that experiment report and to just apply either the original settings or the variant settings, whatever you think, will bring you higher earnings. In the report, you will always find kind of like an estimation of the monthly earnings that you can make if you apply those settings. So all of the information is there for you.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that. There is another question as well regarding auto ads. So Suzanne asked the question that on my website, I only want ads on part of the content and not above the fold. Is this possible by now with auto ads, or should I stick with my individual ads for a single category of the content?
Okay, this is a great question, and there's not like a super straightforward answer, but I'll try and do my best to cover this. In auto ads currently, if you go to the auto ads preview and you input your different URLs, you're able to see a preview of the ads that might serve in your content. So if you don't like some of these placements, within the preview, in those ad placements, you'll find bin or like a trash can icon. And if you place that, that will remove that placement. So for example, if you're viewing above the fold URL and you would remove that placement, then that gives you the ability to do so. However, I think it's important that I mention that we can't guarantee 100% that like no above the fold ads will serve. Just because of the way of the auto ads algorithm work, we're constantly optimizing placements. But the preview is definitely your best way to really go in and understand, okay, what are the different placements Add to Us is planning to make on your site, and really remove those that aren't wanted for you. So I would really encourage you to try that. And then if you see it's not working fully as you would expect or as you really want, then you can go down the manual ad units route if that is working better for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. It's so great to hear the answers from the source of truth, from the product, our AdSense product team. So thank you very much for joining. I will let you go and we will move forward further.
Brilliant. Thank you guys for your time today. And I hope you really have a great session with Sabrina and the team.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
So all of us are dealing differently with the global challenges that we have at the moment. During the last year, we've had different levels of stress, burnout, different inability to disconnect while working from home, at least I can say from my personal perspective. But I also believe that we have already developed our own level of resilience to react to all of these events. I'm happy to invite our inspirational speaker, Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton. One of the most senior women in the fire service, Sabrina combines experience in making tough decisions in pressured and stressful situations with studying the behavioral neuroscience of decision-making. So she really has an incredible story of developing resilience that she will share with us. Hi, Sabrina. Happy to invite you to your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it's really great to be here with you all today. And I hope in the next half hour, I can share some stories with you that might challenge the way that you think about something. So I want to start, if I may, with a question. Now, when you think about a firefighter, I just want you to spend a few minutes just thinking about what comes to mind. Picture a firefighter in your head. Now, normally when I ask people this question, they will answer with things like someone that's really strong or really brave, really tough, normally male, normally looking really handsome, like someone who has just walked off a calendar. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but our nation's fire stations are not populated with underwear models. In fact, you're more likely to find a firefighter that looks more like a middle-aged politician than you are someone who looks like they've just walked out of Hollywood. And I say that with lots of love, I promise. But I know that whatever people think about when they think about a firefighter, I'm the first person to admit that I know not many people are thinking about someone like me. And while it's taken a long time to feel comfortable in your own skin when you're so different, actually, there are some things that I think being different has really, really helped with. Now, I joined the fire service when I was 18, and I've gone from experiencing homelessness at 15, sleeping rough on the streets, to achieving the most senior rank in the fire service at 36. And normally when we talk about people being different, we're normally talking about it in the context of how being different has held us back. And I want to challenge some of that today. And I want to talk to you about how I think being different has really helped me to do things differently, even in a very traditional environment. But most of all, your circumstances don't have to define you, and they don't determine where you end up, just where you start from. And I think that this is something that's relevant to everybody, actually, in all walks of life, because we've all done things where we might be trying to do something differently, where we might be trying to challenge the status quo. And that can be hard for people sometimes, because challenging something and doing something differently can be frightening. But I want to talk to you about how, for me, by not being able to achieve that stereotype of a firefighter by being different, I also believe that I wasn't bound by that stereotype, and I was able to do something in a different way. And I want to firstly share with you one of the biggest challenges that I'd ever experienced, but also how being different in that, I think, helped it to become one of the biggest opportunities. And it's quite a personal story to me. When I was a firefighter, I started off working on the fire engines, like all firefighters do. And my husband and I, before we were married, were both firefighters on neighbouring stations. We worked quite close by each other. And one day I was called to deal with an incident where a firefighter had been quite severely burned. But it turned out that it could have been him. Now, I'll never forget the day, actually. I was in the fire station and I was upstairs and I heard the bells go, and I went downstairs, and a couple of the guys were already at the teleprinter and they were reading what the emergency was. And I can remember looking at them thinking, why aren't they moving anywhere? And I was pulling on my boots and yanking the braces up over my shoulders. And I said, come on, what is it? And they said, it's a firefighter injury. It sounds really bad. And I still couldn't figure out why they weren't moving. And I said, well, shouldn't we go? And they said, it's 241. It's Mike's fire engine. It could be him. And I can remember feeling at that point like someone had punched me in the gut. I couldn't breathe. It felt like, like you see in a film where you've got the central character stood in the center and the whole kind of camera pans all around them and it makes it look like the room is spinning. It honestly felt like that was happening. And I can remember really quietly saying, well, come on then, let's go, and jumping on the fire engine. And it must have been the longest couple of minutes of my entire life. And I remember thinking to myself, I might be about to become one of those people who we would see every day, who would wake up to a bowl of cornflakes and mundane normality, only for something to happen really unexpectedly and their entire world is flipped upside down. And I honestly thought that was about to be me. I was really torn between that role of a responder and all of the accountabilities and the responsibilities that go with that, and the role of a loved one and all of the fears and the anxieties that go with that. Anyway, we arrived there and I jumped off the truck and I couldn't see who was injured at first. I could see a group of firefighters huddled around someone, but the only bit that I could make out was a pair of legs sticking out from the middle of this huddle with kind of dirty patches on the knees. And I grabbed an oxygen cylinder and a medikit from the back of the fire engine and I started to run over. And I can remember my heart beating so hard I thought it was going to burst out through my chest. And I can remember biting down on my lip so hard to stop myself crying that I cut it, and I've still got a scar. I've still got a scar inside there today. And then I saw Mike stand up, and I realised that it wasn't him. And I was so overwhelmed with relief, I cannot tell you. But I was still so frightened and so emotional because I was so scared that it was going to be him. But it was after that event that I really struggled, because what they'd been called to was it was actually an exploding pavement. Now, I don't know what your experience of explosions or pavements are, but they don't traditionally tend to go together. So they turned up thinking it was a hoax. And what it actually was an underground electrical junction box, which had a fault. So it would periodically shoot flame out of the floor like a jet engine. And moments earlier, Mike had been lying on his belly with his head in the pit, poking around, wondering what on earth this exploding pavement was. And it was as he got up to move away to put the lid back on the pit that it exploded and caught our colleague clean in the face. Now, the problem was, after that event, it felt like I'd wanted it not to be Mike so badly. It felt like I'd wished it on this other guy. And this other guy was our friend, and he was really badly hurt. And so I started to feel this immense sense of guilt that I found really difficult to deal with. And I started to think, okay, well, perhaps I need to do something. Perhaps I can do something to stop this happening to anybody else, and that will relieve the way that I'm feeling. And it was at that point that I started looking into things. And I thought, first of all, naively, I thought maybe if I could develop a better burns pack, we'd be better prepared next time. And when I started to research this, what I found was, it absolutely stunned me. I found that the majority of injuries that occur, not just in firefighting, but across all industries, happen as a result of human error. 80% actually, in fact. And that was, for me, a real watershed moment, because that's not a problem with a piece of equipment or a flawed policy or a procedure, but a human mistake. Somebody makes the wrong choice in the wrong place at the wrong time, and someone would get hurt as a result. So I thought maybe if we could understand human error better, then maybe we could find ways of reducing it. But I left home at 15, school at 16. I didn't know anything about human error or psychology or anything to do with that. So I thought, okay, one step at a time. So I went back to night school. I did a psychology degree all the way up to PhD in behavioral neuroscience, looking at how we were making decisions under pressure to try to find out how we could reduce that human error. And doing a PhD while working was actually really tough, because you're supposed to be in the lab all the time. So I was trying to make up these hours, and I'd kind of go into the lab at 5:30 in the morning. I'd run my experiments. I'd go and pull a full shift in the fire service. I'd go home and put my baby to bed, because that was great timing, wasn't it? And then I would go back into the lab, and I'd be there until kind of 1 o'clock in the morning, sometimes for the night shift, until I'd finished all my experiments. And what happened after that was the bit that for me was the most important. We finished the PhD, and I stayed researching with a small group at Cardiff University, and we were looking at firefighters making decisions at incidents all over the UK, in fact. And what we found was that the majority of decisions that people were making at incidents were very intuitive, gut decisions, and not, as was previously believed, very analytical, reflective decisions, which actually happen in very different parts of the brain. And the truth is, in a very fast-paced and high-pressured, time-sensitive environment, we didn't have the luxury of weighing up all the possible options. We were relying on our gut and our past experience and those biases that our brains use as shortcuts to do the right thing at the right time. And those biases were some of the reasons that the crew that turned up with Mike had such a disastrous outcome to that incident. They were relying on their biases instead of looking at the incident as a whole. Now, since then, we've developed some techniques and completely changed the way that we do firefighting in the UK. And these techniques are now used throughout the country, and all emergency services in the UK use them. And we're up to, oh my goodness, 10 Global Science Awards for it now, which was incredible. We managed to get so much change in an industry that is so tied to tradition. But what I want to say is, for me, that was an unbelievable transformation, where we were turning what felt like the worst experience we'd ever had into something that created so much change. And I think the way that we were able to do that was by being relentlessly optimistic about something. And also, to go back to my earlier point, there was also a real power in being different. Because if I'd have fitted that mold, that really traditional mold of firefighting, I promise you, the mold would not have permitted that kind of deviation. It would not. You couldn't be a roughy, tufty firefighter and do something really geeky like neuroscience. So for me, being different was a superpower in that circumstance. It really was. But it also taught me a real lesson. It taught me that you can't always control what happens to you. You can't even control how you feel about it. But what you can control is what you choose to do about it next. And I want to talk to you about that, how you choose to do something in the face of something that feels really difficult, and how you build that resilience. Now, I'd shared something only in the last 2 years that I found really, really difficult to talk about. I mentioned at the beginning that I'd left home at 15, left school at 16, and I had experienced homelessness during that time as well. So I had a backstory that's not unique to me. There may be some on the call for whom it resonates with. My father died when I was young, and my mum found it really difficult to cope, and she suffered really badly with her mental health. And I've always said that if somebody goes to war with their demons, it's everyone around them that gets hit by the shrapnel. And that was certainly the case in our family. And by the time I was 15, it was too much, and I left home and I started to sleep rough. And it was really difficult, actually, because you imagine as a 15-year-old girl, I was terrified about going into care. I didn't want to go into a children's home. I was afraid of that. So I carried on going to school and tried to pretend that everything was okay. And I would sleep in shop doorways. I'd sleep in the porch of a derelict church. For the most part, I slept in a derelict building because it at least gave some shelter. But it was just it wasn't the physical experience of having nowhere to go. For me, it was the emotional experience, because people would treat me like I wasn't there, and in a really kind of dehumanizing way. And probably one of the worst experiences I had was, sounds silly now when I say it out loud, but I just wanted to go to sleep somewhere light. I was sick of not being able to control my circumstances and where I was. So I decided to go to sleep in a subway, because they have that kind of illuminated strip lighting. So I put down my cardboard, and I had a sleeping bag, and I had a little dog. It was a stray dog. I was a stray child, so it kind of worked, you know. And he was sleeping down by my feet. He would keep my feet really warm. So I went to sleep, and I was woken up maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't really know, but it was definitely the early hours, and I could hear some guy laughing, like cackling, and I could feel my sleeping bag getting wet and warm. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, the dog is peeing in my sleeping bag and someone's laughing at me. But then I realized it was this guy. This guy was drunk on his way back from a pub, and he was urinating on my sleeping bag with me in it. And that was so dehumanizing. But the thing is, he didn't really think this through, because I can tell you now, dogs don't really like being urinated on in the middle of the night either. And let's just say that's not the kind of thing you want to wave around at an angry dog. I don't think he'll be doing that again in a hurry. But let me take you through the practicalities of that. I was 16 then, and I had no clean clothes. I had no clean bedding. So I went and sat on a bench in the middle of the town, and I just pulled my knees up to my chest, and I just cried until the sun came up the next morning. The bus station opened up at about 6 o'clock. So I went down to the bus station. I washed myself in the sink as best as I could. I went into the toilet cubicle. I closed the door behind me, and I put my bag down on the toilet. And I pulled out a crumpled up school uniform, and I put on my school uniform, and I went and I sat and I waited for the bus, and I got on a bus, and I went to school and tried to pretend nothing happened. But there's a real point to that, because there's no doubt that I didn't behave in a particularly wonderful way that day. But nobody else knew what I'd gone through that day before they had that experience of me. And that's a real lesson, because we all meet people every day. It might be people we've never met before. It might be our colleagues, and we might wonder why they're behaving in the way that they are. But we never know what has happened to them before we've had that encounter. So it was a real lesson for me in empathy and compassion. Now, it was a really tough experience. There wasn't a great deal of help, but there was a street magazine called The Big Issue, which people who were either homeless or vulnerably housed or experiencing poverty could buy for cost price, and then you'd sell it on for a profit. Now, this was my ticket out of that situation. And I started selling it initially on the streets of a place called Newport, a little town in South Wales. But there were maybe 12 other people also selling it. So it was really difficult to get enough money to even live hand to mouth, really. So I then found a little town called Monmouth. It was about an hour away on the bus. No one else was selling it there. Yes. So I would go there. I would sit there with a bundle of magazines until I'd sold it all, and then I'd come back and do it all again the next day. And I managed to save up enough money after a few really bad failed attempts to get secure accommodation, and that was my ticket out of it. Now, when secure accommodation became a reality for me, that's when I started to think about what else. It allowed me to dare to dream, really. And I started to think about the fire service then, because I figured actually one of the things that I'd experienced at that time is it felt like every day was the worst day of my life. And the thing about the fire service is you're trusted by people to know what to do when others are having what feels like the worst day of their lives. So I figured perhaps I could help other people in a way no one had been able to help me. And although the context was different, honestly, the sentiment was the same. And that's when I started to think about the fire service. But it was really tough. I must have applied to about 31 different fire services and failed a million times before I finally got in, but I did manage it. Now, before I talk to you about the early days in the fire service, I just want to pause, because sharing this story really openly in the way that I just have with you now was something that just 2 years ago would have felt impossible to me, because the problem is I had seen this kind of image of people who were successful or leaders in my industry who are infallible, who never seem to have had a challenge or never been challenged by anything. They know the answer to everything. They always know what to do. And I felt like my experience made me feel really vulnerable. And I was worried that if I shared it with people, then it chimed with my idea of someone who's successful or someone who's a leader in my industry. So I had to completely reframe my idea of a leader and reframe my idea of success, because the reality is any success is built upon failure, upon failure, upon failure. And you grow so much more from the things that go wrong than you gain from the things that go right. And it was only when I realized that I found the courage to start to talk about it, because the truth is there are still thousands of people who are in the same space today as I was back then. And I needed them to know that your circumstances don't have to define where you end up. It just defines where you start from. And that was so important to me to do. So even though it was difficult, and even though I still feel even now a deep-seated sense of shame whenever I talk about it, it's so important to break down the stigma, to help other people to move through that space when I know they're still there now. So that was super important to me. But now let me talk to you about the fire service, because I started at the beginning by talking about that power of being different and how I honestly believe it can be your superpower, but it can only be a superpower when others can see that value in being different. So I got my dream job. I joined the fire service when I was 18. There were very, very few women. When I joined, I was woman number 7 in a workforce of 1,700 men. In fact, nationally at the time, only 1% of operational firefighters were women. So there were hardly any of us. And during the early years of my career, like very many women before me, I had experienced sexism, and I wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. I was told that a couple of people would say this actually consistently: I just don't agree with women in the fire service. No offense to you, Sab, I just don't agree with it. And after a while, I'd be like, yeah, I don't agree with morons in the fire service. No offense to you, but here we are. But during those very, very early years, I'd had my kit messed with by other firefighters. I'd experienced sexual harassment more times than I care to remember, frankly, and received unsolicited and very inappropriate pictures sent directly to my phone. But what I would say is in those days, they were very small screens. So, far be it for me to pass judgment. But I was told that things had to be different for me because I wasn't a bloke. And in fact, I can remember one moment when I really thought, no, this is enough. There was one very senior officer who was trying to give me what he thought was important advice. I'd gone for a promotion and didn't get it. He'd told me that I should never have gone for it because I was never going to get it, because things have to be different for me because I don't have a insert whatever word for appendage you want there. He obviously thought this was a really catchy line, because after he said it for like 4 times, I really kind of thought, what are you saying to me? And I kind of turned around and said to him, look, I might not have a but I'm clearly working for it, which is kind of the same handicap in my view. I knew at that point my future lay elsewhere. But there's a real point to this, because for all of those experiences and challenges, when I look back, certainly in the early years, I didn't challenge it. and I didn't challenge it because I was young and I was insecure, and I felt like that balance of power was against me. And I was worried that if I called it out, then it would affect my reputation. And so I didn't say anything. But by not saying it, what I know now is that I didn't stop it from happening to anybody else as they were coming up behind me. And that was a problem. And so I worked very hard to try to put that right now. But the reason I'm talking about this is not because I think it's just something that other women can relate to, or people who are different that can relate to. Actually, I think everybody can relate to a time when they haven't spoken up or they haven't challenged because they felt like the power dynamics were against us. And what I want to say to you all is no one has to wait for some big policy change or some big cultural change to change that. Please don't underestimate the power that every single one of us has to be the one that challenges that, to take the person aside afterwards and say, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but you're always talking over so-and-so, or whenever so-and-so makes a contribution, you don't listen to it, but someone else made the same contribution and you told them that was the best idea. So sometimes people don't even realize how they're responding to others, and just having a quiet word afterwards can make so much difference, not just to that person who needs to learn from it and grow, but to the other person who might have been subjected to whichever bias or detriment. And believe me, it's no fun when you're leaving work and you're going home crying. And if you can stop that happening to somebody else, we should all grab that power where we can. But there is something else about this, isn't there? And about creating that environment where people feel empowered to challenge either directly or indirectly. And that's creating an environment where there is psychological safety. And this is something that I believe in really, really strongly. We all need to build that environment where people can feel safe. And when people feel safe, they can take a risk, they can be innovative, or they can be okay with being different because they trust that their difference is really valued. And this is something that I think is more important as a result of COVID than ever before, because everyone is feeling uncertain. Everyone is feeling more isolated or displaced than they would have been. So we need psychological safety more than ever. And there are some really simple things that we can do to build that psychological safety. Role model being curious. Be okay with not having the answer. Be okay with failure, be okay with things not going right, because then people will share those experiences and no one will make the same mistake again. But one thing I would say is when you have psychological safety, be really aware of your responses to others, because you can blow it out of the water in a heartbeat with an ill-timed sigh or a glance at the clock at the wrong point in time. But there is something, I think, about thinking about how we are impacting on those around us and whether we take those opportunities to challenge in the way that others might need us to. Now, I'd like to round off by talking about the power of someone that inspires you, the power of a role model. Now, normally when I talk to people about someone who might inspire them, you get all kinds of responses. It's one of my favorite questions to ask people, actually. And 9 times out of 10, you'll know the person that they're saying, because normally it's someone who's done something incredible in history, or someone that's really well known, that has really worked hard for their platform and done something incredible. But I think sometimes we can forget the power and the influence of the people who are closest to us. My biggest inspiration isn't someone that's famous. It's not someone who's done something incredible in history. It's actually my grandmother. Now, my grandmother lived with us for a long time when my father was dying. And so I learned a lot about her, and she had her outlook had left quite a big impression on me. My grandparents were Jews in Morocco, and in 1948 they experienced a pogrom, some anti-Semitic riots in a place called Jerida, where they were from. And my grandmother had been attacked with a machete and left for dead. And my grandfather went to tend to her, well, what he thought was her body. And when he went to collect her body, he had to essentially kind of dig through this pile of other bodies to try to find her. And as he pulled her out, she gasped for air. She was still alive. So they managed to get her some medical help. And as soon as she was well enough, they left Morocco as refugees. And now my grandmother, despite all of this experience, I have never ever once heard her complain about having a bad day. I've never once heard about her talk about her experience with pity, starting again with nothing. And I've never heard her talk about people with resentment. And if anything, the guy that attacked her, she talks about him with compassion and talks about how it must be awful to have lived in an environment filled with so much hate where you can do that to someone else. And she wishes him well. She worries about him closing his eyes and seeing her and thinking that he's killed another person. So that's the kind of amazing person that my grandmother was. So whenever I was having a bad day, whenever I was sleeping rough on the streets, or whenever I was having a bad day in the fire service or experiencing some of the things that I've talked to you about today, I think about my grandmother, and I think if she can come through that kind of experience with so much love and so much compassion and so much empathy, then actually the day that I'm having can't be that bad at all. And there is something, isn't there, about perspective. And for me, that point about perspective, the bad day I might have today, if I roll back the clock 20 years, actually, this bad day might have been the kind of day I could have only dreamed of. So despite everything that we're experiencing, despite all of the uncertainty and the displacement that COVID is giving us, what I would say to you is the world will still turn, the sun will still rise, and tomorrow will always come. And you have a choice about how you approach tomorrow. It's yours, and I dare you to grab it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I started my notes, but then I was like, just stick to my screen to hear your story. It's absolutely impressive and very inspirational. I think it is there are a lot of lessons for us to take from it during these times, and definitely thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you all, our amazing publishers, for staying with us and for taking your time to learn, hopefully get inspired, and the most important, to celebrate you, our women of publishers of AdSense. And we have already seen some of the amazing comments. I would like to admit that we are super thankful for you, but as well, I'm super thankful for people that are behind this event. Everything that we do for you to get inspired, to grow your businesses, and to help you in your everyday life. Hope you really enjoyed the event. We are looking forward to hearing even more feedback, and it's very valuable for us, either within the form that you see at the moment on the screen, or you will receive as well the follow-up email. Please fill in the survey, and you will be able to get the slides from us from this event. Again, the video of the event as well will be available at the same page of the live stream. I think it is the end for us today, and I hope that you really enjoyed the morning with us. You got some tips, you got inspired, and thank you again for being such an amazing publishers and for staying with us. And we really hope to see you in our future events and future webinars. Stay tuned. Thank you.